we are in the paragraph, it says the new commandment. Actually, we are in verse 9. The person who claims to be living in the light while hating his fellow believers is really still living in the darkness. There is, folks, no room in the people of God for hatred of people. Hatred, and yet they're believers, people who claim to be believers, who preach a kind of hate of different races, a hate of different cultures. If I were going to talk about the President Hope, which I said I'm not going to, I would emphasize the fact of how much he encourages hate.
Who is this?
The President.
Really?
Yes, by not like some hate mongers have in the past, but by just the things he says and does. He sets people against people. And I guess all politicians tend to do that. But it seems that he is stronger at it. But do you see how easy it is when you let politics begin to mix with religion? Even when I don't want to, I can do it. But let's look.
Do you want me to respond to what you just said?
What?
About him setting people against people. You said he sets people against people.
Uh-huh.
Would you like for me to respond to that?
If you want to.
Well, we ought to take a vote on it, I suppose.
No.
You said you didn't want to talk about politics.
Yes.
But you fit this right into this verse, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes.
I can't top that.
See, that is the thing that notice I said if I were going to.
It's talking like a lawyer.
Yeah.
Protected clause.
Yes. So let's talk neither like a lawyer nor a politician.
As you wish.
Okay. All right. Living in the light while hating his fellow believers is really still living in darkness. The person who loves his fellow believers is abiding in the light and presents no occasion for them to stumble and fall. Who is the them there?
They're Gnostics.
The fellow believers.
What fellow?
The fellow believers. It says
the person
who
who's
loves his fellow
walking in the
believers.
light.
So the
Yes,
fellow believers.
yes. If you love your fellow, believers, you give them no occasion for stumbling. If I hate you, it'll come out, and it will be the knowledge of my hatred of you will give you plenty of motivation to stumble. People will say something, well, after all, they did this to me, or they said this about me. I remember Max alluded this morning to when he first moved here. And strangely enough, we moved back in the first 3 years after he moved here. And we asked the elders to meet with the staff when we moved back, not because I had to or anything, but because it would keep us and them from developing. And Max shared with us some little and jackleg preacher. That's my title. from down between here and the seacoast that was just every sermon he preached, every article he wrote in the bulletin was just berating and excoriating Max. And it was beginning to get pretty depressing for Max. And we talked about it in the staff meeting. And he said, "What do you think I ought to do?" And we went around the staff talking about it. I'll tell you what, you couldn't get our staff in that room now. I mean, but anyway, one person had this, and I said, "Max, I think you ought to just send him an email of a passage from Nehemiah." And he said, "What is that?" I said, "The passage that says, we are so busy building up something that we don't have time to fool with people like you." You know what? We never heard from him again. And that's I think sometimes of little barking dogs
Chihuahua.
running, Chihuahua, running along, nipping at people's heels. It's just not profitable. It's just not, it doesn't, I know this, it's not Christian. I'll emphasize that strongly. It's not Christian.
How are you this morning?
The person who hates his fellow believers is in the darkness and is spending their life in the darkness and do not know where they are going. Did you ever get up at night when the power was off and back in the days, now we're set up for that now. We've got emergency lights plugged in that if the power goes off, they actually come on. They're charged. But in the good old days, which weren't that good, and just totally disoriented. Now that's the metaphor, or the extended metaphor that John is using here. Because if you hate your fellow believers, you are stumbling around in the darkness because the darkness has blinded their eyes. Now, is there anything unusual about that last clause for you?
Usually it's a bright light that blinds you, not a darkness that blinds you.
Well, what does it say about John's knowledge of visual physiology?
Wasn't worried about it.
He didn't even know about it. That was the theory of vision of the philosophers of the time, especially Aristotle, was that you saw, because of a complex interaction between light shining on an object and an object reflecting back to it, so that literally the darkness has blinded their eyes. That was a literal truth for John. Now, I know people conservative believers feel very strong about things like that, but John was only using the language and philosophy that was You get what? You can't fault the accuracy of the Bible on the basis of any scientific or philosophic fact that it may reflect. Because you can't know what you don't know. If you want an epigrammatic thing. John honestly believed that it was the darkness that blinded people's eyes, instead of the darkness just making it impossible to see. Do you feel comfortable with that? I don't see.
I do, but I think it's kind of weird, but I feel okay with that. That doesn't bother me, but I think that spiritually, darkness does blind people.
Now that, I was going to go on to that. That's what John is using it for.
Right.
And for his purposes, it was acceptable because everybody else believed that that's the way it was.
There's a phrase from a song, I think from the 60s, everyone is beautiful, and it says, there is none so blind as he who will not see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a better, idea of what's being said here.
Yeah. That is exactly what he's saying. That nobody is so blind as these people who will not see. And it was a matter of will. The Gnostics, the enemies of the truth, did not want to love people. Love was either sexual in nature for them and acceptable to some of them and not acceptable to others, or it was verboten. That is, eros was, they accepted eros as love. That's love that feels good, to give and to get. Now, to show you what I mean, is there any one of you that doesn't feel good when you hold a baby up and give them a kiss on the foot? I can see by the smiles on your faces. There's just something about that. Now that's eros. Eros is not bad, but it can be misused. In fact, eros is as much a gift of God as agape. You remember when Max preached a sermon that Jesus, what was his word? Made holy, sanctified human sexuality. For the believer, it is as much a gift of God as air and water. It's a lot easier misused, and
That's
a
what
lot
the devil does it.
Yeah, and a lot easier source of temptation. But it doesn't keep it from being a gift from God. Little children, I am writing you because you have been forgiven for his name's sake. Has been forgiven for his name's sake. Now, you can take this section of the book of 1 John several different ways, and you can make a kind of formulaic thing out of it, and you can make each one of these categories, little children, fathers, so on, represent some group in the church. I don't read John that way. I don't read his gospel that way. John loves, in his writings, he loves synonyms. Now, I discovered that for myself. When he's reinstating Peter, he'll ask Peter, "Do you love me?" And it was phileo, brotherly love. "Do you love me?" Agape love. And finally he says, "Do you even love me brotherly?" And that is that's not Jesus increasing the pressure or the thing. John just liked, think about something that they said about Ulysses Grant, the Union general in the Civil War. He just almost refused to return by the way he went. He would go miles out of his way to keep from doing that. I've known a person or two who was like that. In fact, I have a little tendency when I was, for instance, if Mona and I would drive from Northern Virginia to Conroe to visit, or from Michigan, Detroit area, Battle Creek area, I would deliberately go and come different ways. It's an idiosyncrasy. And you have to learn a writer's idiosyncrasies before you can get the most out of it.
Never realized that it is only John that records that conversation.
Yes. You didn't know that.
Hadn't realized that. I was in the other Gospels too, but it is only John.
You learned something, Jesse.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's why I come here.
Have been forgiven for his name's sake. Fathers, now, he is not talking about some elder category. He is using synonyms, or it's not exactly synonyms. He's covering the waterfront. There's young people, I'm writing you, older men, and it'd be women too. I am writing you, and I'm writing young people. He is not, as I say, dividing the church up in these categories.
It's not making separate categories. He's basically covering everybody.
Yes. Fathers, I am writing you because you have come to know him. Now, here is that. Because you, children, you came to you, and because you have a perfective tense, and this is one way of saying, I am writing you because all of you have become believers, and all of you should love each other, and all of you have received the gift of salvation, the gift of the atoning sacrifice of Christ. That's the reason it is a sin, my fellow believers, to rank believers. Now, in some things I'm smarter than Hope.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? I just don't know which they are. And I know that in some things, Hope is smarter than I am.
Let's talk about politics.
Okay, touche. All right. Because you have come to know the one who is from the beginning. Now, it is just impossible to translate this word beginning and make any sense out of it in the way it is used. It does not have the article. It is not the beginning, but in beginning. Now, I see, Jesse, that intrigues you. What's the difference in saying in the beginning and saying in beginning? I wish Ray was here. He would enjoy this.
I would say that in beginning would be to start with.
Very good. That's it.
And in the beginning that's when everything really first started.
Yeah.
Yes.
A point in time
Yeah.
rather than a quality.
Well, I don't want to touch it. When you get to talk about the philosophy and physics of time, you shouldn't get out of my depth even. Okay, what it is, it's where you can begin. You cannot ask what went before. What was before the Big Bang? God. That's all you can say. And when John talks about in beginning, he is talking about a rational beginning, where this is where you start with your reasoning. You cannot go before the beginning. I know how difficult an idea that is to a lot of people. But either just take it by faith or because I said it.
It's about the same thing, isn't it?
No. No, don't think so. Okay. Because you have won the victory over the evil one. Now, this is a very Johannine phrase. John uses it in his gospel. What is the victory over the evil one? When did Jesus win the victory? And when did we win the victory over the evil one? Anybody?
He gave himself on the cross.
Yes. But
And he rose again?
no, Paul is pretty clear when in the book of Romans that it was his death on the cross that won the victory. See, Satan thought he was winning the victory.
Right.
If you could have contacted Satan in that interim period, do you remember about the 3 lost things in Luke 15? You know, the lost coin, the lost sheep, the lost boy. And where there was more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner saved. If there's possible joy in hell, in that interim period, there was joy in hell. Hell rejoices when people are lost. And when it looked like Satan had won, I'm sure there was the hellish equivalent of joy. I must confess that I doubt that Satan can experience joy.
No, I don't think he can either. But they can celebrate in some sadistic, evil way.
Yes, but that's what I say, the hellish version of that.
Celebration could be.
Yeah. And,
Well, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Because joy has a different indication, but what about pleasure? Would the devil be able to, would Satan be able to?
Yes.
Okay.
He can
have a
experience.
pleasurable experience, but not true joy.
I like that. It may not be right, but
I would question whether he can even really experience pleasure, because I think pleasure comes from God. It's from God's hand. C.S. Lewis writes a lot about the lie that we have in the world, that to have pleasure is a sin. It's not. It comes from the hand of God.
and that's the reason that I accept it, but don't necessarily agree. I don't know how to make that distinction.
Well,
But
I think there might be.
Well, there's a sensual pleasure.
pleasure.
There's a
and
senses
then
thing.
there's,
And,
I don't think that's real pleasure.
but I don't,
When competing teams go at one another and one is victorious, could you say taunting? Because sometimes there's a taunting attitude towards the victory.
That has been made illegal in any team sport now, is taunting.
Taunting, right?
Yeah.
And so, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to plead Paul here. And my plead is, he tells Timothy not to argue over the meaning of words.
Well, to use Paul again, O grave, where's thy victory?
Yeah.
O death, where's thy sting?
Yeah.
Their boast, they can have a boast that is empty.
Yes. So I think we understand each other, even if we don't know what we're talking about. I feel in a good mood today. Okay.
Just like any good family.
What?
I said, just like any good family, we
Uh-huh.
understand each other even if we don't know what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
I've written to you, children, because you've come to know the Father. I've written to you, fathers, because you've come to know the one who is from the beginning. I've written to you, young people, because you are strong and have won the victory over the evil one. Now, you will notice that there is a slight modification of why his reason for that. He associates strength with young people, and perhaps that is his synonym for young, strong people. Some of you have years of service ahead of you, and I glory in your strength. I have this friend, Andrew, and he and I are on pretty well the same wavelength. And we set up something the last time he was there, and it was Friday. No, Saturday, Friday, wasn't it? He came. Anyway, we want to set up a chain of believers consciously so that they can go through enough time to see whether the physical universe is still changing with time. In other words, we want to have enough chain of believers so that we can test some form of continuous creation. I refuse to talking about theistic evolution in my book. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Now, he may be the last of the generation we'll never know. We will when we get to be with God. But the facetiousness of it is, maybe we'll have enough people in this chain that we can say once and for all, God is still creating in the same way he did, that looks like an evolutionary. It appears that way. I do not believe in theistic evolution. I believe in continuous creation. And what I'm saying here is, Andrew and I want to see if continuous creation is still going. My lifetime is better than average, and I can't see any change in the nature of the physical universe.
Isn't there a theory now in science where they believe that the universe is not static, but it's expanding?
Yes, and I'm going to refer you to my book.
Well, I know.
It's all in
With your
there.
book.
It's in there. Read the book.
That's what got me coming to this class.
Yes. Okay. By the way, man, I want to bring a box of books next Sunday to this class. Okay?
Charles, the dog ate mine. I need another book.
Okay. All right. I stopped loving. Now, this is very important. Notice what it says. Stop loving the sinful world and the things that make it up. Now, what's the difference in saying don't love the sinful world and stop loving the sinful world?
The assumption that you're already loving it.
What?
The assumption that you're already loving it.
Yes. And Greek is very excellent in making that. And this is, whether you remember it or not, this is, did you take you took my Greek class. This is an aorist imperative. It means stop loving.
Punctiliar, right?
Yes, it's called point action. And you have to be doing it. And what does that imply? That we all love the sinful world and the things that make it up too much, even as Christians. And John says, stop it. That's like you got a kid and he's whining and he's whining, and so finally you say, stop whining. And that's what John is doing here. Stop loving the world and the things that make it up, and we're going to see the things that make it up in a moment. If anyone loves the sinful world, the love of the Father is not in them. That is, it is a choice. And Jesus, you remember when Jesus says, you cannot serve God and money, mammon. And in the way he's talking about this, you cannot love this world inordinately and love God at the same time. They're mutually, to the degree you love the world, just to that degree, you're not loving God. Now, that doesn't mean you're lost and you're going to go to hell and you're going to rot and all this kind of things. But it is a warning. It's a lot like the Hebrew book of Hebrews. Hebrews could be easily be interpreted that you have believed deeply and all, and then now you've fallen away from grace. But if you read it carefully, nobody is ever said to have done those things. It makes me hungry to teach Hebrews. But anyway,
I have a question.
okay.
You know, in some translations, they don't put the word sinful world. They just say don't love the world. So are they talking about don't love worldly values? I mean, because there's parts of this world that I love. I mean, I love the mountains.
That's the reason I put sinful on it. That is, there is the world. You can be like David in the 8th Psalm. When I see the stars,
Right.
say, how many of the Psalms glorify the created world?
Right.
Okay. And you see how complicated it is, and how it may sound like I have to go over and over it, and I do, because each one of you is slightly different, and so I try to cover everybody's strong spots. Stop, because everything that is in the sinful world, and now here's what are in the sinful world: the desires that come from the sinful nature. In other words, it is the strong desire to satisfy the desires of the flesh. That's from the sinful world.
Nothing wrong with hunger, but when you overdo it in satisfying that hunger, that's when it becomes wrong.
Yeah, it can be. But he's not really talking about that. He's talking about the same things that he talks, that Paul and the NIV, in the NIV, calls the flesh, the sinful flesh. It is the things that satisfy those sinful desires. And that's you're supposed to stop that. There are desires that come from the sinful nature, the desires that come from observing attractive things in the world. Now, I could not translate this phrase.
Lust of the eyes.
What?
You couldn't translate lust of the eyes? Lust of the eyes is the
Well,
phrase.
what does that mean?
That's what I was saying, you've had difficulty translating that into
Yes.
what that means.
Yes, because Eve was the first person that committed that sin. She gave in to the lust of the eyes. But you have to be, and this is what made it difficult, Pam. If you go too hard on the just looking at something and lusting after it. You leave people like we did our young people in the church, in the conservative churches from, I don't know, from the Middle Ages on. You've turned out, and I've had kids tell me this, said, if it's as great a sin to look on a woman as it is to have sex with her, I'll take sex every time. That's a pretty shocking thing to have.
Say that again, I didn't understand.
If looking on a woman and wanting to have sex with her is as bad as having sex with her, I'll take sex every time. How would you answer that?
I think that Jesus is getting to the heart of how to deal with sin when he's talking about that, because you can cut off the source that's going to drive you to the act by the thought process. And when you begin to understand that, and I think that's what Jesus was teaching.
I do too, but it's hard to make a translation in one phrase that makes that. You could do something like this. The person whose every look at a woman is to consider her as a sexual partner. Do you hear the force that if you are the kind of person that does it, or you are, if you, and still that's difficult.
I've heard the term linger used in this context.
I like that, I just don't know how to make a translation with it. But yes, I think that after you learn from Jesus, studying the Bible and all, if you're honest with yourself, you can catch yourself before you sin. Do you understand what I'm saying? That because Jesus had to face that same thing, and he knows what he means. So study him, study what he teaches, and follow that, what comes out of it.
I think I would qualify that as saying overcome with sin, because the sin is there regardless of whether we act on it or not. You know, there's a state of being that is sinfulness that affects everything that we do. All of our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. It's not talking about our wickednesses, it's talking about our good deeds, not our bad deeds. And so even the very good that we do is defective to some degree because of the state of sin that we're in.
I think I know what you're saying. Yeah. I want you to remember this lesson, because the greatest antidote for violating this is to remember this discussion and what you thought about and people's responses to it.
While we've been talking, Charles, I've been reflecting on the relationships in general between men and women. And the older I've gotten, the more I've come to realize the importance of the family. And how the family is a wonderful control device if it's managed right, if it's developed properly, over almost any sin.
Yes. That's a very good observation. Oh, that because everything starts in the central, for this reason shall a man leave his father and his mother, and they shall be joined into one flesh. And don't let man split that apart. I would say that my greatest antidote for sexual temptation has been having a loving wife. And I'm not looking her way because it might embarrass her.
I'm looking her way, Charles, and she is not blushing.
I didn't say she would blush. Because we've talked about this. All right. I don't see our head lady.
Oh, so I'm in her shoes this morning. She had to leave.
Oh, okay.
You've got another 5 minutes.
All right. I want each one of you, I want to get back on this train of thought. I want each one of you to remember this discussion, because it will be your greatest help in overcoming what he's saying here: stop loving the sinful world. And it will be your greatest help in understanding the content of what the sinful world is. One way you can say, everything that's not under the control of Christ is the sinful world.
Charles, I can see how this would also help in those times of counseling, to help people understand why they maybe do some of the things they do, or why they don't have a way of overcoming.
Yes, and I used it. I practiced rational emotive counseling, and if you will listen carefully, you will hear that rational emotive approach. That's reason and feeling approach, and you have to deal with both. Okay.
Can I ask you a question about, it's not in your translation, but in my Bible, the word lust as it's used in here? Is that always connected to human sexuality, or?
No.
What does it mean exactly?
I don't know why, unless it was a Elizabethan use of the word. It is simply the word desire.
Okay.
And it is not, a lot of, the dictionary will tell you that it's a strong or inordinate desire. But that's not Greek. It is simply the Greek word for desire, and how strong the desire is, you have to have some other criteria.
Okay. Does the phrase lust of the eyes, if you say desire of the eyes, I don't think it's, I get more from that than just looking, I don't look at it as like looking at a person and having thoughts about sexuality and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it could be just the desire and the attraction to glitter and glamour and glitz and
That is,
entertainment and
by the way, that's,
Nowadays, it'd be television and entertainment and,
Yes.
you know,
Let
all
me-
this stuff that entertains our eyes.
okay, that is what he's talking about when he talks about the
glorifying in one's way of life.
No, that's the pride of life in the old
Okay.
translations.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm talking about, and if you want to know, in the first occurrence of that sin, it's when Eve looked at the fruit and saw that it was good to eat, not because it was the fruit, but because it exposed them to the knowledge of good and evil.